Hey,
Hey, how are you?
doing great. How are you, Guy?
Good. Here with Jillian, our hash team manager.
Awesome.
So we were trying to sign in under the at Papa Select IG, but we're having a little difficulty, so we just signed in on my account.
Okay, cool. Well, thank you guys for carving out some time and joining us today. Really appreciate it. How's the audio on your end? Can you guys see everything okay?
Yeah, 100.
Great.
Okay, awesome. So I say this every time. I'll probably say this about 4 or 5 times throughout the broadcast, but thanks everyone who's tuning in. Shout out to Rackham's and Fox Tracks. We usually have a lot of great hash makers. If you can't tune in to the full thing, we'll have it up on YouTube and Instagram shortly after. So today, I'm going to introduce Guy and Jillian with Papa and Barkley and Papa's Select, 2 of our favorite brands out in California. I'd love it if you guys could give a little intro on yourselves, and then, we can hop right into some questions.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm Guy Rocourt, co-founder of Papa and Barkley, and of course we have our hash brand, Papa Select.
So Jillian Krall. I actually met Guy and Cornelius and MJ BizCons a few years back, and we stayed in touch. And when they started the solventless line, I'd been making bubble hash for several years, and so joined the team. We started it, over 2 years ago now. Time's flown, so.
Awesome. So when did Papa's Select get started? Because that was actually after Papa and Barkley, like a couple years, right?
Yeah, so I think it was the last actual official Reggae on the River, which is a festival that we have here in, let me move this back just a little bit. Reggae on the River is on the Eel River here in southern Humboldt, and it's a pretty big festival. Before adult use, it was definitely like a traditional market gathering place, and we met Brady of Select Solventless there, and it was, luckily we had some money. We're like, let's just get into this, and it was kind of something separate for our core brand. We started really, washing in cans. We really didn't have a lot of space, and then actually when Jillian joined the team, she started really like professionalizing it, and that's when we were building our facility here at 2nd Street, which has a big walk-in cooled area so that they can really wash in the right temperature controlled environment. So that was about 2.5 years ago, I would say. And it started as just a small project, but then as we started to buy more fresh frozen, which, and really start to build a supply chain, just as a company, we saw the value in being able to partner with farms. We wanted to partner with farms in a way that our core products really didn't let us. But when you're making hash, you get to honor the farm. We love that concept of being able to call out our farms in a way that we can't do in our core products. So being able to partner with them, go and get the smalls for the fresh frozen, get trim at the other end for our core products, really started to build that relationship as well.
That's awesome. And sorry, Jillian, do you have anything to tack on there?
No, but accrediting our farms has definitely been the biggest thing we've done since day one, because without them, none of this matters. And it is really interesting to see how different strains perform under different appellations in different terroirs. And it, will never really be the same. And I do love just seeing those varieties from growing patterns to different nutrients and different strains. So it all comes back to them, and we couldn't make the hash we do without the amazing farms we have. And, we just really released to public for sale at Emerald Cup 2018.
Sorry.
No, you're back.
So
it's all good.
We've made, big waves in just the last 18 months, so it's been exciting.
Yeah, so, I'm more familiar with Guy. We did a MJ Biz panel, which I was happy to be on, and Guy was really hyping up solventless. It was a really cool experience. So we've had some experience together, but Jillian, could you give everyone a little bit more info about your background and kind of what got you into cannabis and hash making? I mean, it's awesome to see, female hash makers. It's such a male dominated industry. So it's pretty refreshing to have some high tier women on the show talking to us about hash, because it's just all dudes right now. So tell us about yourself and what got you into hash.
Oh, well, like almost everybody in here, I started on the traditional market, probably longer ago than I care to admit, but probably close to 20 years ago, and had been working in Mendocino with a really great farmer who got me into the industry and really taught me a lot. And then the first time we made bubble hash was probably 2005.
Long time.
Everybody else, it was, what do we do with all of this trim? And it started out at very basic, in the redwoods, under a tarp, using up our trim, because at that point it was all waste. And what we were able to make with just that was pretty amazing. But it was, block ice, chipping it by hand, working with a paint mixer, harvesting and jumping over and pulling bags. And, it was just insane what it's turned into. And I worked on that for several years and then kind of let it go by the wayside for a bit. Experimented with a bunch of different products, but I always came back to solventless. It's just, to me, the truest, purest form. And I do enjoy smoking it so much. And that's the tough part. But, I really think there's no better expression of the plant than just beautiful solventless extracts. And so, yeah, I, made the full circle and tried a lot of different processes and just came back to this one. And it, I've really been passionate about it. Worked my way from traditional market through the medical market and now to the rec market. And, what we've seen in the last 20 years is pretty incredible. And, I'm really happy to be part of a great team and, we're doing amazing things. So it's pretty exciting.
That's awesome to hear your journey. It sounds like one that's pretty similar for a lot of the people that we talk to who started making bubble hash so long ago. And Guy, I'd love it, before we hop into some more questions, if you could give everyone a little background on yourself too, because I know you've been at it a long time.
Yeah. Similarly to Jill, I started here in California in the traditional market, first cultivating. Of course, as Jillian put it, when you cultivate, you tend to have this byproduct in the form of trim or in the, bag appeal was a big thing. So you have these buds that people, if they're not big juicy nugs, they're not good. You have all this product. I started not with bubble hash, but with BHO. And right down the street from you, I bought one of the first ETS units. Right down the street from ETS. At a lab in Colorado where I was able to blast. Of course, truth be told, I was already blasting here in the traditional ways that we used to do those things. And so, I, just really started getting into extracts through BHO, had a vape pen company in Colorado. That's where my, this whole as we're talking now in the world of social justice and all the things that are happening, I realized in 2012, 2013 that you got to be careful who gives you money, right? Because you are beholden to them. And unfortunately, coffee can money does not work when you're trying to establish a legit business, right? You need lines of credit, you need grid money, as they say, in a bank account. But, the folks that lend you that money, they need to be right-minded. So the folks I partnered with in Colorado were not as green in their hearts as I would like. So luckily, I partnered with Adam here in California, and he had developed the bomb for his dad. That was a really solid product that worked. We like to say that, Pop and Barkley owns the first cannabis conversation because, you can give a newbie a topical and, it's just non-threatening. And now at least they understand THC. They understand CBD, putting it on their skin. They're getting efficacy. Maybe they move to a tincture. Maybe they move to capsules. Maybe they move to edibles. And so that's what we call the cannabis funnel. We've seen it here in California where our retailers are like, you guys draw people in and they just walk down the funnel, usually ending up in like a vape pen or something convenient, especially for the older folks. But with Select, we like to think that Papa Select owns the last kind of cannabis conversation. By the time you're fully mature and you understand what a trichome is and you understand where the medicine is and how that can be captured, especially in a good, 6-star hash where you just see literally balls of trichomes, if you're educated enough to know that, then you're having that last conversation, So that's been my journey, basically, there was a point I did advocate for a while with Montel back in the early 90s, right after Proposition 215 here, and was doing the advocacy work, but I was also growing, and anybody that grows, those 2 lights become 4 lights, become 8 lights, and back then every harvest paid for itself, and you just kept growing and growing. And at one point I took 10 years where I was like, well, I can't really advocate and grow all this weed. Like I can't be so vocal and still be, and for me, it was like, look, you can advocate or you can provide safe access, right? And I've always been a big proponent of safe access. Like cannabis, should not be something that you go to shady areas or get under like on street corners. That's just not right. That's not right for all narcotics, by the way. But cannabis specifically, I was passionate about bringing safe access, obviously with patients first, and even now as we are in adult use, there's this thing with patients being left behind. So even plugging a product, we just finally got into the edibles category and the gummy category, and we decided to be true to ourselves and say, we're going to put out a wellness gummy. Like, not all this sugar, not all this craziness, but a 0 calorie, zero everything, 0 sugar, gluten-free, keto-friendly, all those buzzwords.
Right. Anyone can have it.
Yeah, right, 5 milligrams, sick, whatever. And it tastes good, too. Is it as good as our friends, as some of the other ones? Maybe not, but it's for what it is, it's still on point. But my point is, it's been a long journey for myself. And anyway.
No, that's awesome. And I love when, the people that we have on the show go on these great tangents. I really loved your explanation about, the funnel of how people, experience cannabis and cannabinoids through all the different ways they can do that. That was a beautiful explanation, and one that we'll definitely want to highlight down the road. For everyone who's tuning in, thank you for joining us. If you got some questions you want to ask them, feel free to put it in the question box below. I'll be sprinkling in, viewers' questions. Jillian and Guy, these are some real experts here, so don't be afraid to ask questions. Sure, they can drop some big knowledge like they already have. So I kind of want to go back a little bit to what you had said, Jillian, about growers and the relationship with growers and the material. When we had soil grown, Phil, he was on the show last week. That was one of the big things he said is like, love your growers, make great relationship with your growers. That's what it boils down to for the material. What are your guys' philosophies on growing material and just that whole topic of sourcing great material? How do you guys think about that?
Well, it is step one, and you'll never have the highest quality product if you don't have the highest quality in. We are lucky to be in the heart of Humboldt, and not only that, the heart of the Triangle, and it is the best cannabis in the world, hands down. And if you take all of that, but you have these farms and these families, and they've been cultivating and learning these secrets and learning their land and how to best produce it through generations. It's about trying to keep that history intact and trying to keep all of that knowledge here and not to just be run out by some of the big farms that do amazing things. But, it is just that history and trying to keep it up and going. And so many of these farms are smaller farms and they're family farms, and trying to get through into this white market times where they're trying to get licensed and they have to go through just crazy hoops and the regulations and the costs and the permitting and the licensing. And it's a very expensive, very long undertaking. And we're really happy to be able to help so many of these guys make it through this transition, because it's, we've seen people just struggle through it. And so not only that, I think we're keeping the heritage of Humboldt alive and through the Emerald Triangle. And so that's always the first step. And you do find that where what you can produce on one hillside is completely different than somebody in the valley below you.
Wow.
And I love taking those and just learning the differences. And we have a lot of farms that have, produced the same strain across multiple farms, and it is about finding the one that reacts best to that strain's genetics. We test wash in so many strains, and I would bet less than 5% of what we test makes it out to market, because it is about finding just the best of the best, the cream of the crop. And we're lucky enough to have the best input and the best farmers to choose from. And that is why we're able to produce the highest quality, but it is just those standards.
Yeah, look, more broadly, I think all extractors will say that input product is king, regardless of how you're extracting. But for us, there's an underlying philosophy in the way we're approaching select. We cannot, so we have a blessing and a burden in being thought leaders and growing this industry, right? We're lucky to be here at this point in time to grow this industry, and it's on us to make sure that cannabis doesn't make the same mistakes that other markets have made. It would be easy to farms to aggregate and get bigger and bigger, start monocropping, and then we start to look more like tobacco, more like these other places where there's only one kind of cannabis. That cannot happen. Variety is only inspired when you have small farms all over the place trying to figure out how best to get their appellation, their particular land to produce strains. Also, in cannabis, we have this legacy of what we call pollen chucking, but like every year there's new strains, there's new phenos coming out. Jillian and Guy have to hunt. It's not just this, it's the pheno, like you have to, like not everything is well with ice water, right? So it's forcing now the farmers to iterate, right? So last year THC bomb might have been it. What do you think it's going to be this year, the hotness?
That's what everyone wants to know. The strains and genetics are going to be a hot topic for everyone tuning in. So any insight you have there, people really want to learn from the experts. So
think on it, and I just finished this point that it's super important. Like, look, we are lucky in our core business. It's, you know, we raise some money and it's kind of like a traditional CPG. We have these core wellness products that we put out. But having Select, I always felt like Select gave us our cannabis street cred because it shows that, yeah, we could go to like some big farm and just get the cheapest trim possible, infuse our topicals and our tinctures. But that puts the industry on the slippery slope where those are the people we're empowering. We have to empower what we want to see for ourselves. I want small farmers, passionate farmers to grow magical plants. You know, I met with, I won't say the name, but there's a Primo company out there. And the gentleman's telling me that, oh, well, we'll just buy the farm and, you know, we'll just grow it ourselves. I was like, have you ever grown cannabis? He's like, how hard is it? And I'm like,
turns out.
It's like cooking food. It's like, yeah, I guess it's easy, but it's also extremely hard at the same time. And you don't get that passion to create new strains, to perfect new strains, to work with your extractor unless your heart's in it. And that doesn't happen from some mega farm. Right? We have made that mistake in other agricultural products, and we can't make that here, you know? And so being able to support these small farms, even if it's a, you know, a lower margin product, even if it's a niche product, it doesn't matter. Whatever we can do to make these farms not have to sell out to another farmer and aggregate into these big, gigantic farms, the better off we'll all be in the future, right? Because we might, the newbies might start at the top of the funnel like we were talking about, but we all end at quality, right? Everybody wants fresh squeezed orange juice at the end of the day.
Yeah. No, No, please go ahead.
There will always be a Budweiser, but there will always be craft beer. And, you know, we just choose to be that craft beer. That's where our passion is. That's where our love is. And yeah, we don't want to lose all of these decades and generations of hard work. And it does come down to that. And, you know, I don't think a lot of people realize how long it takes for us to find some of these strains and phenos and things that we were hunting last year are only finally coming to fruition this year. And so we may find a strain that has the proper genetics and it has the terpene profiles that we're looking for. And so we may pheno hunt it, but it'll take, you know, from testing it, and then it'll take a full year to get it back into actual production. And so we are in it for the long game. And it does take, you know, what we're seeing coming out this year is work that was put in place over 12 months ago. And so you do have to just have the patience, and there will be limited releases, something, you know, you are working with so many farmers and life is life. Sometimes things go wrong. We will be having limited releases of amazing strains that were lost for one reason or another, or they worked for us, but they didn't work for the farmer. You know, they meet their criteria. It has to meet their yields, their growing patterns, as well as what we are looking for. And so keep your eyes out, because there's, you know, we've got a great one coming in just 2 weeks. It'll be amazing. And unfortunately, it'll be the last of that pheno, but it's, you know, it is just the long game. And that's what we're really in it for. And it takes, you know, a lot of time and a lot of work to get to where we're at.
Yeah, we're only now turning the corner where, you know, we can shout out some of our farms, Humboldt Kind, Emerald Queen farms that we've been working with for a while, and, you know, kind of like locking in certain key strains. You know, again, going back to the business case, you know, a lot of our investors that come from traditional CPG, they're like, but you have an inconsistent supply chain. I'm like, yeah, that's why it's farm to table. And you know, the scarcity is one of education. It's like, yeah, we may only put out 1,000 units of something, and then we drop it on IG or blast it out to people, and guess what? Folks who want it show up, right? And traditional businesses, they're like, no, you got to keep the stove shocked, and you got to make sure you have a tight supply chain. Yeah, that's how other people do it, but you know what? When folks are motivated for quality, they will figure out how to get it. And yeah, certain things are scarce, and there's nothing wrong with that. You know, there's a huge impetus in business, and I get a lot of pressure to scale, right? And we've talked about how passionate we are to scale solventless, but I'd like to scale solventless. We'd like to scale solventless in the right way, not in a way that cuts corners or marginalizes a concept. You know, everybody, look, I guess the most American thing is making money, right? So we all want to do that. However, we want to raise the bar and try to do it the right way. Like, not by just trying to like monocrop or find some strains and like buy a farm and be like, just grow that. Like, we never said to a farm, just grow the garlic cookies because it's doing well. Well, garlic cookies was last year or the year before. This year, I don't know, right? And so that part, it does not jive with traditional business practices. It's hard to standardize, right? We have to be out there hunting for phenos, working with these farms over a couple of years. Sure, you get a few strains that you can encourage them to grow again, or, you know, they get a sense of like, you know, the size of the trichomes or what you're looking for or what waters well, you know, and that dialogue definitely helps. But at the end of the day, it's not a scale and forget process, you know?
Yeah, no, that makes a ton of sense. And I know you guys have taken home some awards at Emerald Cup for your solventless. When we put this post up on our Instagram, letting everyone know, Busy something, he's either in here now or was saying that, you know, he's smoking you guys over 710 nowadays. You know, you guys have got a lot of love on the posts we put out. So clearly the quality is there. I think people are really stoked on the brand, and, you know, you guys haven't been around super long. And I think you're building a huge name for yourself. We had a question come through that I really wanted to ask you guys, which was, can you guys tell us what your favorite hash rosin consistencies are and why? And if you see any different test results between jams and cold cures and some of the various ways that it can go. So kind of taking the conversation from the strain selection and the philosophies there to, you know, some more topics on the end products. You know, how do you guys feel about hash consistencies and textures in solventless?
Well, you know, I'm just really passionate about hash, and that is, to me, just the epitome of perfection when you find just those beautiful sandy trichome heads. But then as far as when we're getting into working with sauces and batters and rosins, a lot of that comes down to the actual strain itself.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, we were pressing out some Dozy Zos 5 from Sunrise Mountain Farms today that is just beyond beautiful, and it would make
nice,
spectacular rosin. But I know from working with it last year that when we sauce it, you just get these big, beautiful, sugary crystals in it. And so some of it is how that responds. You know, the Banana OG, the rosin is a lot less stable than some of our other strains. So I tend to always batter it because it's about keeping it consistent from our lab all the way out to the consumer. And the best way to do that too is just to learn the strains and the oils and terpenes that that particular one has, and then, you know, maximizing its potential really. So I don't, based on what I prefer, you know, you kind of try different things and experiment. And yeah, some of it is not a guessing game in the beginning, but, you know, you're still experimenting and learning. And as we've gotten through these regular strains, we now know what this one reacts best to and how that one, you know, ends up when I batter it out. I have this massive terp layer on it, and it's beautiful. Or if I sauce the Dozy Zos 5, it has huge crystals. And I don't think I could ever pick a favorite. You know, for traveling, batter and sauce is amazing because it's super stable.
Right.
But that comes down to two, not doing major cropping and growing, you know, variety is the spice of life, and I never want to be held to just one consistency.
But I also would echo that, you know, I think that's where the hash maker's skill comes in, is in knowing how to get you the right product from the strain. Sure, if we all just stay in the cold room right next to the freeze dryer, we could all just smoke 6R hash all day long. But the fact a lot of that stuff wants to butter up. Like, you know, as soon as it gets to a certain temperature, it wants to change consistency. So it's on the hash maker to understand, like, what's the best product, you know, to make out of this, you know, hash, you know, so it all comes out of the freeze dryer. What should we do with it? What's the best way to deliver it to our customers so they get the most value out of it? You know, again, as we start to get more educated on this, even the folks on the call, it's like, I view Humboldt where you might come visit us. We have a dispensary that we're opening. Perhaps you come visit us, and then there are some of your favorite strains that you've only gotten, in rosin or only gotten in batter, and you might come and see the crystals because we're right here at the lab, and they're still frozen and like you can see them. It's like those of us who are super nerdy about it have our terp lockers with our cool pad in it.
Yeah.
Or I have some stuff that Jill's given me that just stays in my fridge, and my wife's like, "What is that?" I'm like, "Just leave it," and I bring the peat right up to it, and that's not true actually. No, look, props to Puffco Pete, but when it comes to 6-star hash, the rig has to come out. Something. You have to.
It's a ritual, right? That's what Phil said last week. He gave us a really good explanation about, whether he prefers hash rosin most of the time, but that the 6-star, not only is it rare, but it's also a ceremony to get it right, to heat it up, to, get that little tiny, it's all, the wafer, whatever you want to characterize it. That's interesting to hear.
I'm passionate about the ritual, just like we're passionate about tourism here in the Emerald Triangle. The rituals of cannabis, like, I feel like it's a thing that I've been joking about since college, like bong etiquette, weed etiquette. And now that we do have adult use, it's like those things are happening. Like, if you think about scotch or wine, there's always special glasses, special decanting, special ways of doing it. And we just that nomenclature and those things in our industry, right? And eventually, as lounges start to open up, having a proper rig, having your 6-star served to you while it's still cold before it butters up, getting your temperature right, all those things are in our immediate future.
Yeah, that's awesome. And one of the words that you specifically used very early in our conversation, Jillian, the terroir, probably not even pronouncing that completely correct either, but of the land and the specific hillsides and all these things, those are terms that I think winemakers have traditionally used for a lot of their products. And now I'm starting to see a lot of that terminology come into the hash world and the growing world. So do you guys think that, micro dabs and swanky lounges are going to be the primo cannabis experiences of the future?
100%. 100%. Look, I think that now as we're getting more educated and like cannabis is as nuanced, if not more nuanced than wine. We just haven't had the same time. I'm not a wine person. I haven't gotten educated on it, and I know that I'm not educated. I do have friends that go to wineries. You're super educated. They understand the different kinds of grapes, the size of grapes. They understand the rain, like whether it rained, how juicy the grape, all these like new cannabis is the same as Jillian explained, like from one valley to the next. In our law, N64 is an appellation from Humboldt. We hold possible that Humboldt may only grow certain kinds of phenos and strains because of the land and the environment they were in. The concept of ocean grown here, where we are in Eureka, closer to the water versus inland in Willow Creek versus down south in Mendo, we see subtle changes. So what does that mean when we start to get other appellations from other good cannabis places, whether it's overseas, what was going on in Colorado, the stuff that's being grown now that, there's some outdoor grows, some sun grown going there. I should say we're also big fans of sun grown. I spent a lot of time indoors, but that was because
we had to.
That's because we had helicopters and bad folks looking for us, right? Now, is the power of the sun. I strongly encourage all growers to stop using AC, stop using electricity. If you want a good greenhouse with light depth, that's great. You want a greenhouse with some light supplementation and some environmental controls, that's great. But in our world now, the carbon footprint to grow indoors is just not needed anymore. And harnessing the power of the sun is awesome. I also firmly believe it grows bigger trichomes, which means better hash.
Yeah, everything we release here is all sun grown. And I did grow indoor for a long time, and they each have their positive marks, but I found indoor, depending on where you're at, is oftentimes the only choice. But when you have just the perfect environment and you're in that perfect land like we are here, nothing will ever compare to well-grown, sun-grown cannabis. There's just something that cannot be replicated indoors.
So just so I'm getting my definitions here right, because I'm a big stickler for nomenclature and terms in the cannabis industry, it's the Wild West right now. People are calling this, that, and the other thing. When you say sun-grown, do you also mean in greenhouses? You don't just mean strictly outdoor, correct? You mean no supplemental lighting? I mean, I guess if you could define your guys' definition of sun-grown, that would be awesome.
To me, sun-grown, there are definitely, light depths and stuff that we use where we have additional lighting, and that's just to, one, open up the time period that farmers can grow in and to help them maximize their profit. But to me, sun-grown is just something where they get, the greatest portion of their light from the sun. And what That's altering the time of day a little bit. That's completely different than indoor, where the plant is never stressed, conditions are always perfect. And yeah, like pretty, but I feel like they're, you know, when you get into the trichomes, I don't want to say it's hollow, but you know, life builds character and character builds flavor.
Yeah, that's right. And
that's a great line.
It's a good point. Stress is a big part of the cannabis plant. If you know, again, understanding the trichome and understanding its real purpose as a protective mechanism. For us, we love it. The plant just wants protection, and so you do get more out of stress. I mean, most indoor growers towards the end start to crank up their dehumidifier, start to lower their water because they want to stress the plant into pushing out more oil. That happens naturally with all the different things that happen in the environment when you're doing outdoors. I do agree with Jill that, you know, as long as most of the light is coming from the sun, if you have some supplemental light during the winter to like extend your, you know, your veg period or your whatever, or if you're doing hoop houses in the, you know, height of the summer, you know, to get the depth going, that's all good to me. But I do have a question for Jill. Have you noticed any difference between the full term and the light depth that comes down during like the off season?
I have definitely, you know, I mean, nothing will ever beat that full term, you know, October harvest. And, you know, what we get off of our winter runs is, you know, maybe not quite as potent, maybe it doesn't yield quite as much. I won't say quite as potent. It's generally more in our yields. And so it's just altering that, you know, but it's the same for the farmers. They generally don't yield quite as heavy either. And then get a little less yield as far as our hash and rosin processing, but it's, you know, it's still incredible quality material. But yeah, I would definitely say it's a little less in the winter.
Yeah. Okay. That's a great explanation about, you know, what sun grown is, you know, on your guys' end of things. I'm hoping someday that all of this will be, you know, put in a book somewhere that we can all reference the same thing, solventless versus solvent-free. I think we're starting to get there. For everyone who's tuning in, my regular announcement, we'll have the full conversation up on Instagram today and YouTube next week. We've got Guy and Jillian from Papa and Barkley and Papa's Select here with us. If you've got a question, use the question box at the bottom so that we can put it up on the screen. A lot of good conversation going on in the comments. Got a lot of hash makers and growers here talking with each other. It's really cool to bring people into the conversation who are even talking amongst themselves. So I'm going to jump in. We've had a couple good ones come through.
Love you, Nate.
Thanks for joining us there. We've also got Solventless Mind, who makes incredible hash and edibles. Shout out to a lot of hash makers here that are on the show too. Any tips for home hobbyist washing without access to a cold room? You know, we like to talk about big business and all the tools and tricks to make the best, but what about people at home? What could you offer for them?
Look, I like the analogy, you know, beer, you know, where people don't have a cooler to put their carboy in, and whenever you need environmental controls, you just got to get creative. It's just that simple. So, like, for instance, back in the day, we would wash only in the morning, right? This is before Papa Select, and even before Jillian had her proper room, you know, we'd have the AC put down all the way, and like, you know, it was cohabitating with our bomb. So you can imagine folks are pouring tincture on one side of the lab, right, and are freezing, and then on the other side you have all the hash kids with their coats on. It's not cold enough. Don't have access to a cold room, you have to get creative. Maybe you have to wash in your garage at night. Maybe you have to do it in the morning. Maybe you can only wash in the winter seasons, right? But the fact is, yeah, you're right.
At night, pre-chilling your water goes a long ways. Maybe lots of ice on hand, because we've done that through the summer months. And the first thing, and it's just about, you know, it might not be ideal for it, but if you can keep your water cold, keep your sprayer cold, make sure you get it frozen right away. All of those things can be worked around. And so, yeah, you're just going to go through a lot more ice and water to keep that chilled. And then, of course, make sure you have the best water you can get, because that is cleaning it with. And so we always use RO water and RO. I know that's not always available, but if you can, just try to find the best filtered or the cleanest sources that you have. And it's about keeping your water as cold as possible and freezing everything, you know, getting it, as soon as it's collected, get it into a freezer.
Yeah.
And that'll go a long ways for it.
Okay. No, that's great. And that actually reminds me of something that Nick T said on a previous episode, was that like cleanliness of your lab is such a big thing. So obviously the cleanliness of your water is critical. Cold temperatures, that's a big one. So for people who are watching at home, a little tidbit is try not to use distilled water, because if there's any issues in your water, like residual pesticides, if your water treatment locally isn't very good, it will distill and concentrate those. So RO water really, really helps. We preach that all day. So I'm glad you guys brought that up.
For sure.
Yeah, it is. And it is about being clean. Like Nick T said, you know, clean everything top to bottom every morning and every night. And we were actually inspected once, and they came through and looked at the equipment. And the inspector asked, well, you know, is this brand new equipment? You just unboxed it. I said, no, it's been in use for 6 months. I said, well, where's your cleaning log? It's in our SOP. Well, it doesn't count if you don't have it on paper, but, you know, we keep, you know, immaculately clean. And so that, you know, you look at it and you do think it's a piece of brand new equipment.
For sure.
Any contaminant, any particle of dust, anything. We've been killing the maintenance team with ventilation and all of our filters and everything, but it is, you know, it does come down to it to keep that quality as high as possible.
Yeah, I mean, we're dealing with micron-sized particles, right? And the last thing we want is for somebody to spend, you know, $90 to $100 on a gram of our hash and have, like, you know, anything in there. I mean, like with products, it's like afraid of hair, and we're afraid of, like, you know, any little particles. But with our hash, we're literally afraid of like a speck of dust, right?
Yeah.
So the smallest speck of dust in your golden rosin, you're like, what is that, right? And so, yeah, from whether it's the brutelesses or the PurePressure presses, like everything cleaned regularly, because every time you go to press, you can, you know, like if the plates have any, you can be no contaminants basically on any of the equipment, because it might show up in the rosin, and you're trying to have, you know, especially for our products, a lot of times like clarity is important, like consistency is important, and like want to be to know that nothing else is in there, you know?
Yeah, and anyone who is familiar with having macro photography done of their product will have the most golden melt, and they'll look at it under a microscope and be like, is that an amber head? What is, you know, what am I looking at? We had Eric Nugshots out here about a week ago doing a bunch of macro photography, and we're just starting to get some of that back. And I mean, it's crazy at that level, like how small particles can be that can change the quality of your hash very quickly. So that's an interesting comment. I'm going to throw another one at you guys here. We got Foxtrax with us. He was on a previous episode. Great guy, great CBD hash maker. What are some favorite strains you guys got going on to consume or process, or both?
We've got some really good ones coming out this year, and a couple more that we'll be testing in the next couple of weeks. Right now, I've really been loving on some Tropicana cookies we got from down south, and it's just got this incredible profile, and it is hands down the best pain-relieving cannabis I've ever had. So, is
it washing purple for you guys? We've definitely seen the modern classic get all kinds of anthocyanins in there.
It's still been super blonde. So
nice, cool.
Farms, it'll be a couple of partners that we're really excited to work with. And that comes down to two, where, you know, got two different amazing farmers, and they're both growing this, but they also have another handful of amazing strains. So it is about working through that and finding out which strain comes best from which farm, or if they're different, you know, running them both. So, but yeah, the Tropicana cookies has been a really nice, enjoyable change for me the last couple weeks.
Yeah, and for me, I haven't had a chance to process recently with the team, so I can't really speak to that. I have been making some products that I want to talk about, because we do intend on expanding our select line.
Awesome.
But consuming, I like going from, you know, extremes. Like I love going from like a gassy, like garlic cookies, to like a super sweet pink lemonade, like dab for dab, because it's just constantly blowing my mind at how.
Lemonade.
Oh yes, exactly.
Garlic cookies and pink lemonade mix.
Yeah, Jillian's been, you know, so we only have been putting out our first press, the very best of the best, right? Mm-hmm. And then I think we did a run where we did some second press, which was a little bit more affordable, and same quality, definitely from a terp perspective. I mean, we told you guys, clarity is awesome, and that's what you pay for. And if you're a true connoisseur, you should go after it. But the second press is often just as terpy, just as heady the clarity just won't be there, right? So I like to go between the two extremes. And then, yeah, in terms of expanding the line, the thing I've been working on with Jill is I have this vision that one day a true head can go in and get our awesome concentrate, have a tincture that tastes the same, and also from that farm, from that the flower of that strain that, of course, smells and tastes the same, and then an edible product, likely a gummy or a hard candy, that also smells and tastes the same. And like, I'm not talking about looking at the COA and seeing the terpenes. I'm talking about smell and taste. We've gotten the tincture already where you can smell the concentrate and you smell the tincture and you're like, oh, it's the same. You taste the tincture and you do the dab and you're like, clearly the strain, right? That's what we're that aspirationally. It'll take us, probably throughout the end of the year to get these products out, but hopefully there's a day where you walk into your local dispensary and you're, psyched on the, Tropicana cookies and you're like, oh, let me get that. Oh, and you have the tincture of it. Oh, I might as well get an eighth of the flower, and then if I have this edible product as well, you get all 4 products from Select, all with your favorite strain. And I just don't want to tell you that it's your favorite strain. I need you to be able to smell and taste that it's your favorite strain. And that starts to lead into our next thing where, just like the wine folks, people have to develop a wine palate. I don't know Franz from a $1,000 bottle of wine, right? But in cannabis, I will be able to know the difference. And so I want folks to start to understand, like, whether it's an edible, whether it's a tincture, what is the taste of cannabis, right? I don't want a strawberry gummy. I want a pink lemonade gummy. I want to taste my strain and appreciate the flavors and nuances that cannabis has to offer, not just in a smoking or vaporizing form, but in a tincture form, definitely in a flower form, and maybe in some edible.
Yeah, that is an experience I would love to have with your products. We had Solventless Mind made a good comment here just, momentarily ago about, the difficulties of going from a tincture to a gummy and the decarb process and how that, obviously some of the volatile terpenes disappear. Not asking for your secret sauce, but, do you think that there's some pretty big challenges of getting to the edible portion of that end of the equation? Does that necessitate some reintroduction? I mean, he's right on the money with the challenges in the decarb process with edibles.
Yeah. So first of all, shout out to Solventless Mind. I had a chance. Tiana shared with me some of the cube gummies they make, and just taste straight up like, I love it, right? It's like, but like, those things taste like cannabis. That's the way it should be. That's what we're going for. It is difficult to capture and harness the terpenes and have them express themselves in a candy product. The gummies are harder. I will throw out there that hard sugar candy was a little bit easier. So like the hash product, it's not every strain. Not every strain is going to express itself in an edible. Like a fruitier strain, like tangies, pink lemonades, those fruitier ones, definitely you'll get a hint of them. In the gummy, it's much harder. In the tincture, not as hard, right? To get the taste of the different strains to come through. So yeah, it's difficult. I have some ideas of how I'm decarbing it and how I'm retaining terpenes. I can tell you one thing that we won't do, and it's not that I'm opposed, it's just not our style. I'm not breaking the plant apart and re-terping. So I'm not going to it and attempt to capture the terpenes in a cold trap and reintroduce them. That would not be the way we typically like to do things is truly keep everything whole plant. The whole point
single source,
less refinement. So if I can create these products with the least amount of refining, the better off I'll be. So yeah, when I have to apply heat to decarboxylate, I of course run the risk of burning off those VOCs, those volatile organic terpenes. That's the trick, right? Of course, I know I could heat them up, off-gas the terpenes, capture them in a cold trap, reintroduce them, but I think we can do better.
Gotcha. No, that's a great explanation. And, what we are hoping to do, and COVID put the brakes on everything for us in this filming category and why we're doing so many of these IG lives, is we have our solventless review series where we sit down with hash makers and producers about their products and, consume and enjoy their products. We're trying to get out to California when it's safe, and we would love to hit you guys up and have you guys on an episode for that where we film and, talk about your products in person. So keep an eye out for that. Hopefully this winds down a little bit so that we can make a move there. I'm going to go ahead and talk through at least one more question that we got from the audience, and then we can go through some other ones. Someone you just shouted out, Nasty Nate. Any new cultivars this upcoming fall from our family of farms? I know that you probably don't want to drop everything too early, but is there anything you can talk about on this one?
We have just a laundry list of new strains coming, and it has been nice to get ourselves really well established last year. And we have everything from some crazy GMO crosses to some GAC crosses. We've got, a dozen new farms that we're working with. We've got a lot of grape crosses coming. We're getting into, Fatso and Sunday Driver and some of those that have been around a little bit, but just trying to get those prime cuts. But definitely a lot of good things in the work. I always hate to name them out until you know how they're going to do, because again, so few of ours actually hit our quality mark, and you get people excited about something that's never going to actually come to fruition. That's a tough. But we do have a lot of, we've got some grapes and creams, some other really exciting things coming. So as soon as we get through another stage or two of testing, we'll start dropping those names. But yeah,
that is what is GAC? I'm not familiar with GAK. What is that strain?
We've actually got a lot of GAC crosses, and I am blanking on its lineage right now because my brain is just fried with strains. But there's some really good GAC crosses we've got coming too. So hopefully by the end of this year, nobody will be asking what is GAC.
Okay. Yeah, including me, people in the comments talking about Third Gen Farms as the breeders for that one. So that's awesome. Excited to learn some more. I'm always trying to keep up on my strain knowledge and see what else is out there. So, please go ahead.
That we should maybe mention here is you talk about nomenclature. That's one of my favorite words for the cannabis industry, because we don't have a codified nomenclature. People use full spectrum, whole plant, solventless, solvent free, and all these terms, and they're not exactly been really defined in a way that we all approve of. More importantly, the lineage thing is great. Like, again, using our wine friends as an example, they have lineage of grapes, right? And usually it's about the land and so on, and they've kind of settled on the kinds of grapes. But yeah, right now, as we do these crosses, the tracking of lineage, right? And where strains come from and how they've been crossed and who the breeders were, it's kind of amorphous. And, I think in the future, there's a couple of coalitions out there, but really getting together as an industry and starting to put some rules and some nomenclature and, codifying and recording the lineage and having maybe some ways to breed. And that all leads me to the point that one thing we're not doing in the cannabis industry enough now is saving our tissue cultures and understanding and learning from agriculture some of the pitfalls that happen when we do scale. Right. This is just new knowledge for me, but I recently became aware that in the ornamental flower market years ago, they had a huge collapse of their market because all their plants essentially got viruses and whatnot, and they were going from clone and growing from seed. But when you go from clone and seed, those viruses continue. Right. So establishing tissue banks where when you go to start a crop, it's coming, that it's clean in terms of virus is super important. But how do we balance that with the farmer's ability to want to constantly pollen chuck and basically crossbreed new phenos, new types, new strains, right? I don't know what the answer is there, but it is important to note that as we scale this industry and get bigger and bigger and bigger, we have to also start to be a little bit more protective of the drawbacks of scaling in terms of viruses, in terms of the bad things. I guess one way to think about it, as we get bigger, the bad things get bigger, right? So when we're making,
that is why those small family farms, they can do that better than, something that gets into these massive acreage farms where it spreads quickly. But there are a lot of farms too that are doing some really good work on that line of keeping those viruses out. Essentia Gardens is super knowledgeable on that. And it's, it is nice that it's finally coming, but it has been all about education the last couple of years, and even just educating shops and bud tenders and people how to smoke our products and how to process them. And now it's going to be about educating farmers, and we're just on this, curve of knowledge for us all because we've all been so limited in so many years. And so I think, the changes that we've made in the last couple of years and the changes that are going to be coming in the next 5 or 10 years are going to be just astronomical.
Yep.
It's really exciting to see the future happening. So,
well, let's talk about the future. We've got about 8 minutes left before we wrap up here. And I always like to ask everyone who comes on the show, where do you see solventless going in the next year, couple years, 5 years, down into the future? Everyone is always trying to see what's next. So, please give me each of your takes. Where is solventless headed in your opinions?
I think to me it's pretty straightforward. Solventless is the future.
Preach.
I often use the example of fresh squeezed orange juice versus from concentrate or tang. Solventless is definitely that fresh squeezed orange juice. I think people understand that quality once they're educated. I feel that right now the reason why we don't use like solventless extracts in even our core products, right, is because of an economic barrier, right? So I think as we scale this and as we have just more, we'll have more solventless, right? So right now it's the top tier and it will remain that. I think that top tier is just going to grow a little bit more and be a little bit more accessible as the public starts to understand, oh wait, there's another way to do this. A good example is cold pressed extra virgin olive oil. It's like 3 times the price, but most people are like, no, I get the extra virgin cold pressed olive oil. I'll spend $15 as opposed to $5. And usually you might get the $5 if you're doing like a brine or something like that, right? Making olive oil. But like if you're gonna be using it on your salad, you're gonna get the best that you can. I think that that's the same for the cannabis industry. Right now, we have a lot. Look, this is nothing against BHO. It has, you know how I feel about CO2, so we're gonna go there.
Where's Jimmy when we need him?
Some of the cryoethanol folks, they're doing some good work as well. But
I do think it is, and I think even as a society, if you see it in the last 10 years across so many different avenues, where we're coming to be a lot more aware of what we put into our body and how that affects us health-wise. We've seen a big push in the last decade towards, small craft wineries, small craft breweries, back to farmers markets. I think people are really starting to take into effect, the quality and what we're putting into ourselves and how that comes out in the long run and health-wise and just what we feel. And, even taking my mom who came from out of state, and we were at one of the grocery stores and she was like, well, this is expensive. I said, yes, but it's the highest quality produce, the best tasting vegetables, the freshest meat. And we went to make dinner that night and she was just blown away. And it is that where, I think people are really getting back to their roots and are learning the places where, they want to spend those couple extra bucks and that they're finding that it completely is worth it.
Yeah, and look, I also want to just shout out, look, we have a national CBD line of products.
Right.
It's important that people know that is also solventless. We have some good partners in Colorado and Vermont. One plant, this hemp thing, you guys, that's the feds just fucking with us again. One plant, agnostic of cannabinoids. You grow the right plant to grow juicy trichomes filled with THC or CBD, that's your choice. Grow the right plant. When you're growing the right plant, you can then wash it or keef it or do whatever. Our and Colorado CBD, quote unquote hemp plants, we mechanically sift them, we dry sift them, so we keep them and then we press that keef and rosin. And I'm just gonna throw out there, but we partnered with a large manufacturer of herbal products, and we built them on the fact that, hey, you should be using solventless. Everything you do is better than and organic and all this. And they didn't understand cannabis. They thought CO2 is the only way to get the oil out. They also, I think, thought the oil was in the leaves and stuff. I was like, no.
No.
The plant ready for you to have it, and I guarantee you I can get you the same 650 milligrams per gram oil, right, without literally touching it with anything at all, right? Yeah. Dry it, press, and you're good to go. And so now we're starting to sell that B2B to other suppliers. And like at first they were like, oh, is that a conflict of interest? I'm like, no, we need more voices amplifying this solventless game. We need more voices talking about the value proposition of clean, unrefined, unadulterated, no chemicals touching it, oil, right? So yeah, the CBD market's, educating them. The CBD market's taking off and they're using, distillate is, 100% opposed to that. That's not whole plant cannabis. That's never going to be full spectrum. But we can now, on a national scale, give folks potent CBD, 650 milligrams per gram rosin that has literally never been touched by anything other than some cold, dry sifting and some warm plates to press it into rosin. And they're really starting to eat it up. And so the same thing we do here in California, we intend to do it nationwide with CBD, and of course intend to push solventless throughout the nation as THC and all that abates.
That's amazing. It's been awesome to partner with you guys on this too, with that. And I really want to highlight for everyone who's tuned in right now what you said kind of at the beginning of your explanation, which you also drove home really hard when we did that panel a couple of years ago, which is that it's all the same plant. It's just different manifestations, different cannabinoids that are being represented by the various phenotypes and all the different strains, but it is one plant. So when people categorize it differently, hopefully we will get to some better nomenclature like we've talked to all along to get these terms figured out, because that's what really lends so much legitimacy to our industry. When a solvent-free concentrate is one that's had the solvents removed. It's not a solventless concentrate. They are different things. So we've only got a couple minutes left here, and every time it literally goes down to the last second and who I'm with gets cut off, and it's kind of awkward. So I'd love it if you guys could tell everyone on the show, where can your products be found for Papa Select and Papa and Barkley? Give us your pitch, and then we'll wrap this up.
Yeah, absolutely. So here in California, we have great penetration, approximately 90% of the dispensaries. So I would say most local retailers carry Papa and Barkley products. Select doesn't have the same penetration. That's because of just a scarcity of the product. But you can look on the website to the store locator to see where it is, and also follow us at Papa Select, for the IG drops for when new stuff is coming out.
We actually don't really we haven't had to do any marketing for Papa Select. It's all been
it's that good.
Boards and our amazing Instagram followers. And so we're always trying to post something new that's dropping, and then feel free to DM. We'll find the shops in your area or shout out the shops you want to see. We are working really hard to get that knowledge up and running out there. Honestly, sometimes they drop and they go so quick, it's hard to keep that up to date, but it's a big project this summer to keep, weed maps and stuff like that current. But in the meantime, Instagram is a great way to find out anything.
And it's getting bigger, you guys. Right now, as we speak, we just got approval to build a bigger freezer. Storage of fresh frozen is super difficult. Just quickly, last year's power outages scared the shit out of us.
I bet.
You don't want to have $1 million of fucking, excuse my language, $1 million of in a freezer and get a report that the power's out. So backup generators, larger freezers, larger economy of scales, more place for the team to pack out and wash, all that's coming. So hopefully next time we talk, I can say we're in every dispensary with both products, Papa Select and Papa and Barkley, and just go get it.
Well, that's awesome. I would love to have you guys back on the show in the future. We already have episodes booked out into September. So we have tons of good hash makers and people coming on the show. Thank you guys so much for joining us. We'll have this up shortly. Really appreciate your time, and thank you everyone for tuning in.
Awesome. Thanks.
Thank you.
Yep.
All right. Bye, everyone.
Baby,